So I want to do a video on bipolar disorder and the keto diet. I first considered doing this around early December. I've been looking for additional therapies to help stabilize my moods. Usually my moods are pretty seasonal. On a 1 to 100 scale, with 1 being the worst depression ever and 100 being the worst mania ever, usually I rotate between a 30 and a 70. 30 is around February, my lowest point, and 70 is around July 1st. My moods are very correlated to the sun. And so I decided to start the keto diet on February 27th. A few months ago, I'm like, what do I have to lose? This could be truly transformational. I'm watching some of these YouTubers, and these are some of the healthiest, most in remission people I've ever seen in my life. So what happened when I started the diet? Well, I didn't really know what I was doing. So I was thinking, well, I need to eat a lot of butter. I need to eat a lot of steak, stuff like that, which is just erroneous. You're getting way too much protein. So I can say the mistakes I made the first couple weeks were not having a meal plan. I just kind of I focused on cutting the carbs most of all. I didn't focus on the fat ratio, the protein ratio. I was just like searching every item, every ingredient, every food item for carbs and keeping those carbs below 20 grams. And I will pull up a graph here. So when I started the diet, my mood was, excuse me, I'm looking at the graphs on the side here. My mood was about a 32 on a 100-point scale, so definitely in a depression. And as I went through the next couple weeks on the keto diet, I did have some issues where I was sluggish because I think I was lacking salt. It's really important to get sodium, a lot of sodium when you're on a keto diet. So I first noticed that I entered full ketosis on March 10th, which was about 14 days later, because I weigh myself every day and I had a 2% increase in 2.5% increase in body fat overnight. I also noticed that my urine was going clear instead of dark, so I wasn't putting out ketones into my urine anymore. One of the things I realized looking back is I was eating way too much protein, like 150 grams of protein a day, and I weigh about 150 pounds, so that's about 1 gram of protein per pound, which is excessive and probably put my body into more glucogenesis. That's when your liver turns proteins into sugars, which is a very stressful process. Your body puts out norepinephrine and cortisol to do that. So about 17 days in, on March 13th, I noticed that my stress levels were very high, which I partially attributed to a mixed state that I usually get in March or April. I have a 2 to 4 week mixed state where my mood rapidly elevates. And so I took me going from a 32 to a 40 within a couple week time is pretty normal. But I did start to break the keto with rice. There were other warning signs, like I felt vasoconstriction in my blood vessels, like they hurt. And that's a sign that you're pumping out way too many stress hormones. And I also have my Garmin watch, which tracks my stress and tells me what's going on. And looking at that graph, my stress levels were absurdly elevated. I mean, March 12th, I think I was around 42 stress for the entire day. That includes sleeping, which is insane. And then my body battery was routinely going down to 5%, and it was barely recharging. I wasn't getting hardly any sleep, which was rapidly elevating my moods. And so what I did about 3 weeks in is I actually went into the AI with Gemini. I knew the kind of foods I wanted, and I just had to write me a meal plan. And it's not a very complicated meal plan. It's the original one I switched to 3 weeks in was 3 meals. Now I have 4 meals. It was a breakfast, a snack, and a dinner. Now it's a breakfast, a snack, and a dinner. More evenly spaced out. And I went in and I had the AI calculate, the different types of fats, what level, different types of fats do I need, what different levels of proteins I need, the glycemic index of carbs. There's different carbs. Some carbs are like straight sugar and your body processes them fast. Others, like boiled sweet potatoes or basmati rice, are very slow release carbs. And I also calculated my caloric intake. In other words, using my watch data, what's my basal metabolism, how much exercise do I do a day, so I could calculate out my carbs. So I kept rotating, between kind of low 80 grams of carbs and trying to do like 40 grams of carbs. And whenever I would do, 20 to 40 carbs, I would always feel terrible. And so I came to realize that carbs are a strategic resource. They're not bad. It's certainly bad if the key here is to reduce your sugar spikes throughout the day. So I eat most of my carbs at night. It's usually in the form of a quarter cup cooked. It's probably more like half a cup uncooked and half a cup when it's cooked. So I find that works very well for me. It shows up in my stress statistics. It shows up in my body battery statistics on my watch. I feel better. And I do spend most of my day in ketosis, probably from a light ketosis, probably from about 4 a.m. to 6 p.m. at night, at least 12 hours. I spend my time in a light ketosis, which is perfectly fine. The carbs help me sleep at night. They make sure there's plenty of tryptophan in my brain. But I just want to issue a warning out there because I think there's a lot of irresponsibility regarding some of these videos. I've spent 20 years managing my disorder without medication, so I am well adept at managing any sort of crisis or mood elevation or depression. Whereas someone who has a history of hospitalization or other kind of negative things in their life, they could really mess up doing this diet. It could really negatively impact their health and their future. And so I think there's a lot of discretion required. I think the focus should be more on finding the diet that's right for you. Different people have different dietary needs. They have different allergies. They have different responses to glucose. I mean, for me, the most stressful part was I went from a 40 out of 100 to a 62 out of 100 on my mood chart in 3 days. And I was really redlining. I knew something was seriously wrong and I had to figure out what was wrong quickly. I hadn't experienced something like that in 12 years. So, if that can happen to me, someone who's more high functioning, I would hate to think of what could happen to someone who is not as well adjusted to coping to adverse reactions. So I'm going to keep doing the low carb. It's great. I love being in ketosis part of the day, but I don't think I'll ever be able to do full keto. I don't think it's sustainable for me. I don't think it's wise for me. The data shows that low carbs, backloading the carbs in the evening works great for me, and I'm gonna keep doing it. It's providing increased stability for me so far. I'm about 9 weeks in, and I'm getting good results.